All right, making his first appearance on the show, the 30-plus year voice of boxing, the first ever sideline reporter, and so many other things. The great Jim Lampley, who is joining me on the show, fresh off his return to the boxing blow-by-blow scene just about a week or so ago, as we published this episode from the fight card in Times Square. Jim, welcome, and thanks for being here. We will add the author to your long list of accomplishments. The book is It Happened, A Uniquely Lucky Life in Sports Television. It's tremendous. I was telling you, it's excellent. Read it cover to cover, I think on one of my long flights, actually, when I first got a copy of it. Thanks for being here, first of all.
My privilege. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you, Chris. Longtime admirer, longtime fan, and very happy to be sitting with you again.
All right, so I want to get into the book, but I have to ask right off the bat, your return to ringside commentating, was it what you expected? How was the experience?
Well, it wasn't what I expected exactly, because I certainly thought that the fights would provide more fireworks than they provided. The fights were desultory and disappointing. So that presents a challenge for the blow-by-blow person because, of course, at the end of the day, professionalism is you have to tell the truth, and you understand and realize that the people who are employing you would probably like for you to be as promotional as you can possibly be. So there were some moments the other night when I was thinking, well, big comeback, got a lot of attention, fun to be here, not sure it'll happen again, but we'll see. At the end of the day, I walked away feeling pretty good. And then I waited to see, okay, what are the reviews going to be like? And the writer I most deeply bond with and most respect was with me the following day. And I had enough temerity to say, okay, so did you hear any of the commentary? And he said, I listened to all of it. And I said, what's the review? And he said, you were Jim Lampley. And that's the highest compliment I can pay. So hearing that, respect that I have for him, very satisfied. And, you know, if whatever it leads to going forward, I'm fine. I did come back. I got the chance to be there at what amounts functionally to the pinnacle of the sport now, even though the fights weren't very good. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed Tarver. I enjoyed Mike Coppinger. I enjoyed being on the air, and that's enough for now.
It didn't sound like you skipped a beat, if I'm being honest with you. You sounded like Jim Lampley. I think that's the perfect way to frame it, because from moment one to the very end, you sounded like you were picking up right where you left off in 2018. I remember watching, very early in the morning in Saudi Arabia and texting with people that were ringside saying the exact same thing. You sound exactly like you once sounded with HBO.
Well, thank you. That's exactly the kind of compliment I would most want to hear. And we'll see where it leads. I hope it leads to more blow-by-blow commentary, but regardless, I got the chance to do this. It was tremendously rewarding. I heard the things I wanted to hear from my friends. On we go.
You have called fights in a lot of different places. What was your take on a fight card being held in the middle of Times Square?
Beautiful and absurd, both at the same time. It stretched the limit of credulity in a variety of different ways. Obviously, it could not have happened without a great deal of money being spent to make it happen. Obviously, some political dice were moved around on the chessboard to make sure that we had the chance to do what we did. And I just wish that the fights had been better because, a large crowd of people turned out to fill the space. There was a lot of enthusiasm. Oh, my gosh, that's Mike Tyson over there. And unfortunately, the quality of the competition did not live up to the surroundings or the buildup or the effort that the rest of us put in to make it good.
Turkey Alashik is the one bankrolling these big events, bankrolled this event in Times Square. if he came to you and said, I'm thinking about doing something similar. In fact, they kind of are thinking about doing something similar in the summertime, holding an event outside of a traditional venue. What would your advice be?
To be real, Chris, I went 6 years without calling a fight. And I had no idea why I was going 6 years without calling a fight. I knew that I wasn't dead. I knew that my capacity for doing that probably had not overwhelmingly diminished. I did not know which circumstances, political, social, business, otherwise, were keeping me from doing that. But at the end of the day, after 6 years of calling a fight, one man reached out, called me to a meeting in a hotel in New York after having sent me an X message during a PPV.com fight that I was doing in Las Vegas. And that one man flipped the switch and put me back into boxing play-by-play. If that man called me tomorrow and said, Jim, I want you to pick up a huge bucket of manure and walk it down the street, I would go out looking for manure to put into a huge bucket. Seriously, because whatever he wants at this point in time from me, he deserves that.
We were joking on the elevator ride up about the old Larry Merchant line of, and I'll paraphrase it, you can't save boxing, you can't kill boxing, more or less. Turkey Alashik is a new player in the boxing game. What kind of impact do you think he can have on the sport?
Well, money is a huge impact, and his will to do it and his obvious outspoken love for the sport. That's all great. The matchmaking has to be intelligent. The matchmaking has to observe the fundamental realities of the sport. There are lots of professionals in the sport who understand, don't put a counterpuncher in against a counterpuncher. They're going to pose and look at each other. A great fight has to have either two attackers or an attacker against a counterpuncher. And if you don't observe that matchmaking reality, you are asking for trouble. So they've got to be a little bit sharper and more judicious about how the matches are made. And recognize more intensely that styles make fights. But the basic ambition of wanting to put great fighters in against each other and spending the necessary money to do that, that's all good and should continue.
Is it, when I looked at the matchups on paper, I understand how they played out, but it did look to me like they had the right style matchups on paper. Like, just look at the two last fights. Jose Ramirez is a come-forward fighter. Devin Haney is a natural boxer. Rolly Romero, historically, has been a come-forward fighter. We saw that with Gervonta Davis. Ryan Garcia, his last fight against Devin notwithstanding, is a counterpuncher. He's going to look to time you with that left hook. Like, on paper, I kind of like the matchups. They just went so horribly wrong. Like,
if Romero had attacked and given Garcia something to paint with, as you say, a fast-handed counterpuncher, that might have been interesting. Romero realized early on that he could simply pose and win the fight. It wasn't difficult for him to do it. And with all of his newfound strength, his defense was impregnable. The few times that Ryan realized he had to try to make a fire and jump forward, he got hit. So that one fizzled. The opponent for Teofimo, Barbosa, I've seen him fight better than that. He didn't fight well the other night. And he did not create anything that created an obstacle for Teofimo. He allowed Teofimo to essentially go through a sparring session and win the fight. So these fights weren't badly conceived necessarily. The fighters didn't perform.
Yeah.
And they didn't perform for big purses. That's disturbing. And I don't know why it happened. But I was looking at the environment thinking, well, is there something about the environment that is inhibiting this? And all I could come up with, which is definitely not enough, was, well, it's humid. They're probably not accustomed to being in circumstances this humid because they work out in gyms where there's air conditioning or heat or whatever. But at the end of the day, it was bizarre that the fighters underperformed the way they did.
And you didn't get your moment, as we kind of transitioned the book, called It Happened, which is your most famous line when George Foreman won the heavyweight title. Was there a part of you that was waiting for not to say it happened, but one of those moments. I know every play-by-play guy, all the guys that I've worked with over the years, whether it's Brian Kenny or now Todd Grisham or Ronaldo, they love those moments. They love that
There
moment
was
where
a
they can have.
moment somewhere in the middle of the evening when I said to myself, okay, whatever you say here, if this continues the way it is, it's going to be little remembered, and there's nothing here that is going to fit into the book as a postscript or anything like that, and that's fine. Sometimes you don't get to make action as a commentator. You just have to call what you see in front of you, and the things like what happened in Foreman-Moore, the Barrera-Morales fights or the Gotti Ward fights, those are tremendous gifts to somebody like me. That's like presenting a canvas that's already been done by Picasso and you get to put your signature on it. That wasn't what happened the other night. So I was fine. I've done this for a long, long time, and I totally understand that you can't pretend that something is a full-on fire if there are no flames, and there were no flames.
The Foreman-Moore fight, where does that rank among the great moments of your broadcasting careers? I leave the book up here for the YouTube watchers.
People ask me, what do I think is my greatest call in boxing? And obviously, there are some to which I affiliate and which I think of as meaningful. And the two that most stick out, partially because they were in the heavyweight division, are Mike Tyson has been knocked out. I like the word economy and the flat, prosaic nature of it. I was looking not to try to elevate or consecrate this moment as something great, because you could not possibly have, no amount of volume or verbiage would have elevated that moment to something bigger than it was. I knew this is the fight that succeeds Clay Liston in 1964 as the biggest upset in the history of boxing. And in the back of my mind, I heard a very dear friend of mine. I had asked Jack Nicholson on a golf course a couple weeks before, Jack, when you're getting ready to deliver the signature line of the movie, when you're getting ready to utter the line that is the fulcrum for the whole script, when you're going to the set to say, I can't handle the truth, or you can't handle the truth, excuse me, what's your mantra? What is it you think about? And he looked at me and said, Lamp, same thing I've been thinking since the first time I went to acting class. Don't overact. And as Tyson's being counted out in Tokyo, what I heard in my mind was, don't overact. So that became, Mike Tyson has been knocked out. I'm proud of it because I did not try to be a part of that moment. I just described that moment. That was big. That was good. I liked it a lot. And then we get to my friend, professional colleague, spiritual advisor in some ways, George Foreman, getting ready to fight Michael Moore for the heavyweight championship of the world. And he's my expert commentator at HBO. And there were several occasions prior to the fight, 3, maybe 4, I might be dressing it up, it might have been 2 or 3, when I would pull George aside, crew meal, fighter meeting, production meeting, and I would pull George aside and say, George, how are you going to beat Moore? He's a southpaw. He's a mover. Holyfield couldn't find him, and Holyfield has much better feet than you do. How are you going to beat Michael Moore? And every time I asked him, might have been 3, might have been 4. Every time I asked him, he would look at me with that flat, implacable George Foreman expression and say, Jim, you watch. There will come a moment late in the fight, he is going to come and stand in front of me and let me knock him out. Always the same words. He will come and stand in front of me and let me knock him out. So what I now say to people is, go to YouTube. Look at the 10th round of Foreman-Moore. See if you can find a better description for what happened than exactly what George said would happen. Moore came and stood in front of him and let him knock him out. And that became my call, which was actually, in a way, me talking to George. It happened. It happened. For word economy, for the specificity, for managing to elevate a moment to the place where it belonged without over-talking it, that's my best call. I'm proud of that. And that's why it's also the perfect title for my book, because so much of the book, as you now know from having read it, is about coincidence, luck, timing, all the things that I could never have predicted that happened, that took my career here, there, et cetera, et cetera. And looking back in trying to describe it, there's no better way to describe that than all I can tell you is it happened. I'm not sure why or how, but it happened.
I want to get into the timing, coincidence, luck part, because you, in addition to your work as a boxing commentator, launched a profession, the sideline reporter. I don't know who exactly invented it, but you made it, you popularized it.
I defined the role.
You defined the role earlier.
What can you do in 24 seconds or less?
Could you ever have imagined when you took on that role that it would have evolved into a staple on every broadcast everywhere? No professional broadcast, no college broadcast, no some high school broadcast I've seen. They all have the sideline reporter. Could you ever imagine what it would evolve into?
Yes. And it was late in the first season when I already knew that, contrary to what ABC Sports had told me, contrary to what the college football producer Chuck Howard had told me, they weren't going to go out and do another talent hunt, find somebody else every year. They were going to ask me to come back and do another season on the sidelines. They were going to send the other person, Don Tollefson, to local television in Philadelphia. And I figured all that out and knew what they were going to do. And then listening to Chuck Howard, the head of production for ABC Sports and the senior producer for college football, and most especially the director, Andy Sedaris, who sat next to him in the truck, was a huge part of the team and huge influence on how college football was seen. Listening to them in production meetings, the way they worked in the truck, et cetera, it dawned on me. Next time, it's going to be a woman. They are going to use this role to begin to dress up the telecast with attractive women who can expand the envelope of who sportscasters are and who sportscasters can be. The next person they hired was a woman named Ann Simon from Philadelphia, who became the first of the now long, deep flood of women who have done the sideline reporter role. I mean, how many men? Me, Tom Rinaldi, maybe a few others that I'm not remembering right now. But by and large, for the last 20 years or more, it's women. Because it's an ideal role for putting someone who has feminine attractiveness on a telecast that's mostly about males.
So how does boxing come into your life?
Well, Capital Cities Broadcasting, a stations group, bought ABC from an individual owner named Leonard Goldenson in 1987. As they took over the management of ABC, they were a stations group, so they wanted to put their own stations manager in charge of the stations division. So they now need to rearrange upper tier management at ABC and find some way to move the stations guy, Dennis Swanson, out of his role as stations manager so they can put their own guy there. And Rune Arledge, legendary, unique background and personality, unique weight and power under the preceding regime, is running two divisions, news and sports. Logic tells you running news is a 24-hour-a-day job. How can one man run both the news division and the sports division? That doesn't make any sense to them. So they take Swanson out of stations and put him in charge of sports, and he arrives at ABC Sports with one basic predilection about our division. And that predilection was, who is Jim Lampley, and how do I get rid of him? And looking at me stylistically, okay, still thinking of me as the college-age reporter, spit and polished kid, preppy, seeming, etc. He was an ex-Marine. I was a draft dodger. At least that's the way he saw it. He decides that he needs to get rid of me, wants to expel me from ABC Sports, and he wants me to walk away from a contract that has 3 or 4 years remaining and has specific guarantees related to the Olympics that he doesn't want to fulfill. The Olympics are coming up in less than a year. Calgary '88. It's somewhere in the middle of '87. And he decides that the best way to get rid of me is to assign me to boxing. Boxing will embarrass me. Boxing will expose me in a place where I don't belong. Boxing is something that I won't be able to do. And by the way, I'll be seen by the audience as the direct successor to Howard Cosell. I had already been the direct successor to Howard Cosell on the halftime highlights of Monday Night Football. It could have killed my career, but I survived that one. So now he puts me in the boxing chair thinking that that's going to get rid of me. What he doesn't pay attention to and doesn't realize is that the boxing executive for the network, who's now going to become my expert commentator, has signed to an introductory look-see contract a 19-year-old heavyweight from upstate New York whose name is Mike Tyson. So my first 4 or 5 television exposures calling boxing at ABC are Mike Tyson's first 4 or 5 television network exposures.
Could you see something back then?
From the first moment. Because the very first fight I did in Glens Falls, New York, Mike Tyson versus Jesse Ferguson, is the fight in which Mike exploded Ferguson's nose in the 5th round with a vicious right-hand uppercut. He detonated Ferguson's nose. There was blood all over the ring. Alex Wallow went into the ring to do the post-fight interview. Mike, tell me about the uppercut. Captain Matter taught me that the purpose of the uppercut is to drive the opponent's nose bone into his brain. I was trying to drive...
Tremendous impression right there.
I was trying to drive his nose bone into his brain. And as soon as I heard it, I thought, oh my God, look at what I've happened onto here, all right? This kid is not only going to be the biggest public figure in boxing, he's going to be the biggest public figure in sports if these quotes continue. And within the next 2 weeks, they all came out. Boxing is a hurt business. Everybody's got a plan until you hit them, et cetera, et cetera. All the things that D'Amato had taught him to say. And within a month or so after that, he was the biggest public figure in the world. And I was doing his fights on ABC. And eventually, the most prestigious network ever in television reached out and said, we want you. Swanson did get me to leave ABC because he was going to embarrass me at the Calgary Olympics. I wound up working here in Los Angeles at KCBS TV. But I had a clause in that contract that said I could do HBO if HBO wanted me, and they did.
Mike Tyson was a phenomena.
Beyond.
A cultural icon. I've had this debate with boxing people for years about his greatness as a fighter, because if you look down the resume, you don't see the quality wins. Now, the 4 years that disappeared because of his prison sentence cost him the ability to find out. But what do you think would have happened in the early 1990s, post Buster Douglas, if Mike Tyson went on and fought George Foreman, fought Holyfield earlier in his career?
He'd have been up against it just as he was later in his career. There were style deficiencies with regard to Mike that were dramatically overlooked because of all of the explosive knockouts at the beginning of his career. You know the sport. A lot of that was matchmaking. Jimmy Jacobs was a spectacularly skilled matchmaker. Mike knocked out the first 17 or so opponents. They were cartoon-style knockouts. People were flying through the air. They cut together a highlight reel of that. It was 1 minute and 40 seconds long, sent it to every local sports director in the country. Every local sports director in the country had to fill 5 weeknights of 3.5 minutes on the 11 o'clock show, and a lot of them struggled to have enough content to do that. So every local television sports viewer in the country had seen Mike before they'd seen Mike. And all they'd seen was him knocking out guys and making them fly through the air. The Douglas knockout in Tokyo, the odds are either 36-1 or 42-1. Choose whichever periodical journal you want to document what those odds were. But automatically, because of those betting odds and the context, it becomes the biggest upset in boxing history. Look at what had happened before that. In the preceding year or so, he went the distance with Tony Tucker. He went the distance with James Bone Crusher Smith. He went to the last 10 seconds with Jose Rizalta. He went the distance with Mitch Blood Green. He went 10 full rounds with James Quick Tillis. There were scorers at ringside who had Tillis as the winner, not Tyson. It wasn't that big an upset when you consider that Douglas was 6'4", 235 pounds, a former college basketball player who had the foot skills that you would expect from a former college basketball player. He dominated Mike for 10 rounds and knocked him out. It was not the colossal upset that everybody thought it was. And Mike was always at his height and with his attacker skills going to be up against it against any taller fighter who had a modicum of defense, who had a right hand that would come straight over the top where he had trouble seeing it. And that was part of how all this, unbelievable career adulation eventually ran aground when Mike ran into matchups that were different.
I always felt that Mike had an awareness of that too.
Totally.
Right? Like,
totally. He was the last person who was in the dark. Mike was a boxing savant, and he always realized that. And the apotheosis of that is after the Lennox-Lewis fight, June 8, 2002, in Memphis, Tennessee, when Lewis did whatever he wanted for 6 rounds and eventually put him away with a right hand. They had known each other since they were 14 years old, when they had been put into a bedroom together, watched black and white fight films on the wall in Canastota, or not Canastota, in Glens Falls or upstate New York. And he had known Lennox since they were 14. Now they're fighting 18 years later, something like that. And I went into Mike's dressing room afterward and walked in, found him sitting alone in the room on a metal folding chair, petting a naked baby on his lap. Later learned that the baby was his son. And as I walked in, I said, "Hi, Mike." And he didn't even look up. First thing he said to me was, "I've missed you." And I thought to myself, I thought carefully, and I thought, he's not saying he missed me. He's saying he missed HBO. He missed the early stage of his career. He missed when he was king of the world. He missed all the things that we shared together during that period of time. Can't blame him. And I said, "I've missed you too." Because it was true. I loved him personally. I liked him a lot. And then he looked up at me, private, us alone. He said, "What was it that people expected?" He's 6'6". I'm 5'10". He's got a right hand that's just pure dynamite. If he touches you with it, you're going to be hurt. I've known this since I was 14 years old. What was it that people expected? And I said, "Mike, you're Mike Tyson, okay? You're going to deal with that for the entire rest of your life."
And he did as recently as last year. I mean, people thought going into that Jake Paul event that
he's still Mike Tyson.
he was still Mike Tyson.
Yeah, no amount of Lennox Lewis or losing or anything could rob Mike of the aura that is still left from his comic book period, And by the way, that's happy making for me. I want him to be happy. I want him to make tons of money. I want him to get along with his children and everything. As far as I can tell, all that's working out. And he'll never have to fight Lennox again.
He has been tremendously successful over the last 10 years with his outside business.
He was on the telecast with me the other night, and I loved that, So, yeah, on we go. And, people think of him as this menace. He's the last person in the world who's a menace. He's as sweet and lovable and cuddly as he can be up close. And if you know him, you know that. But the public still wants to see something else, and that's fine. He makes a lot of money from it.
And I remember seeing a clip years ago at the peak of Mike's power. He was on, I think it was Arsenio Hall, he was on with Muhammad Ali at the time. And I think it was Arsenio who said something to the effect of, "If you guys fought, who would win?" And Mike is quick to say, "Not me." That one.
Well, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Ali would have been exactly the wrong opponent for Mike.
Yeah.
And Mike, again, Mike was built up by Jimmy Jacobs, one of the greatest matchmakers of all time. Mike understands what matchmaking is, so he knows himself very well.
We both love boxing and love it when it's at its best. You had a bird's eye view of the evolution of it over the last 30, 35 years. How did you see it change from being in a great place in the late 80s, early 90s, even into the early 2000s, still in a good place? How did you see boxing evolve over those years?
Well, HBO and Showtime were meaningful. You know, they were pay cable networks, but they weren't so expensive that the average wage earner in Toledo couldn't buy them. So people could access boxing at the highest level on Showtime and HBO. Both of those telecasts were good, well produced. The feature pieces were good, etc. Both of them had expert commentators who were terrific at presenting the sport. Larry Merchant, Roy Jones, George Foreman, the guys who worked at Showtime. Both blow-by-blow commentators, Barry and me, and then Steve Albert and me. We were all competent. You know, regardless of whether you loved us or hated us, we were competent enough to deliver the sport and to work with expert commentators and help to maximize them. So all that was good. And then you have the rise of the Latino fighters. Almost all of the Mexican fighters in particular fought in the most appealing style. Face first, aggressive, throw as many punches as you can. Fights like the whole Barrera-Morales triplicate, you can't beat that. You can't get better than that. It complemented at the same time by working class American fighters who benefited from the intelligent matchmaking of the networks, and you wind up getting Gotti Ward, which is legendary. You know, all you have to say is Gotti Ward, and people can envision the style of fighting. And then the rise of Eastern European fighters who brought an entirely new influx of talent to the sport, and in some cases, Gennady Golovkin in particular, personality. He was one of the most irresistible personalities ever in the ring, and he had just enough English to pay it off perfectly. He was good boy.
It's almost Tyson-esque in a way. Like his quotes became even this fragmented.
Because you expected the explosive knockout, and then when he delivered the explosive knockout, the smile, the perfect manner in the post-fight interview, and he was good boy. It was
big drama show, all
absolutely irresistible. I had breakfast this morning with Tom Loeffler, and you know, all we talked about was Gennady this and Gennady that and everything like that.
What did you think, Gotti Ward turning into what it did? I mean, among the great surprises in your boxing memory, where does that rank?
Way up there. I mean, way up there. You know, listening in my head to my closest male friend ever, Emmanuel Stewart, screaming, "Oh my God!" over and over. And I mean, there are a lot of memories that attach to Gotti Ward, and a lot of them, of course, extremely poignant because of what happened ultimately to Arturo, the degree to which they became blood brothers, the moment after the third fight when they insisted on going to the post-fight medical evaluation at the hospital in the same med truck, wouldn't get into separate trucks away from each other, had to be together. You know, what I learned from that and have described to people often, and I saw another example of it last spring at Canastota when Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera were with me and spent the whole weekend arm in arm, went to every event together, wouldn't sit anywhere other than with each other. And I'm thinking, these two guys tried to kill each other. You know, how in the world does this evolve? But I've said to fans and fight lovers over and over, when you watch two guys like Gotti and Ward, like Barrera and Morales, seemingly try to kill each other for 12 rounds, what's really happening underneath that is they're falling in love. They're falling in love because they will never again know somebody who understands them the way this opponent does, who has tested them the way this opponent has, who has shown them the kind of respect that this opponent has shown them. And when they fall into each other's arms at the end of 12 hellacious rounds, that's real. That's love.
An incredible moment and a defining fight series between.
And what makes boxing different from other sports? Boxing is the greatest metaphor for life of any sport. And I'll say that until the day I die, which might be tomorrow, but the bottom line is it's absolutely true.
Was there anything for you that was particularly difficult or challenging to write about? Difficult or challenging to write about?
No. The The book is written stream of consciousness. I didn't take a note. I didn't make an outline. Every day I wrote something and wrote it basically trying to mimic the style in which the story would have been told by my mother or grandmother, the two people who taught me how to tell stories while competing for my attention for 30 years. I would write until I thought I was finished writing that day, and then I would go to bed that night and lie awake on the pillow and think, all right, now what do I need to write tomorrow? And doing it that way, I finished the book in, I think, less than 3 months.
Wow.
And I looked at it, I read it, but I resisted the notion that I would go back and rework and do some other draft because I knew that what I had written was mostly from the heart. And then I gave it to my as told to author, who's done 10 or 11 books and was the sports editor of the Daily Tar Heel when I was a freshman in 1966, 67. I gave it to Art and said, you know, let me know whether you think we have a book. He called me back in a few days and he said, there's no question you have a book. And by the way, it's going to be more than 250 pages. I had not anticipated that. And he said, I think you can feel good about it. And I said, so are you telling me it's a good book? There was a little pause and he said, Jim, it's not a good book. It's a great book, okay? I've been involved with a lot of books. This may be the greatest one because it's so human. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be properly self-praising if that was available and meaningful, and I wanted to be self-deprecating if that was what was important. I wanted to not shy away from my warts, but I wanted to be able to talk about those things that were triumphs for me in the right way of casting them as in some way coincidental, in some way accidental, because, you know, there's a whole lot of credence given to the notion that you make your own luck. I had luck that I didn't make. I had luck that came out of the Cracker Jack box and touched me in a way that I could not have possibly anticipated, such as an executive at ABC Sports who wanted to get rid of me and assigned me to call Mike Tyson fights.
Now you can thank him years
Very
later.
much. He's still alive, and he knows that. And oh, by the way, and you will learn this more and more and more as you stay in the broadcasting business. The same folks you meet on the way up, you're going to see them again. Dennis Swanson, who tried to ruin my career, wound up sitting in my control room for hundreds of hours of Olympics broadcasting when he was the chairman of the cable project at NBC, and I was the cable host for several Olympics at NBC and the overnight host for several Olympics at NBC. And every day I'd walk in, he'd sit in the control room and say, good morning, Jim. And I would say, good morning, Dennis. And at the end of the day, every evening, I would walk out and say, good night, Dennis. And he'd say, good night, Jim. So don't alienate even your worst enemies. You never know when you're going to see them again. And he and I worked together, and it was fine. It was professional. We were both pros. We knew what to do.
For decades, HBO was the gold standard in boxing broadcasting. At what point did you come to grips with, realize that it was going to end?
I didn't know it until sometime after December 8, 2018. I could not at first believe that AT&T, the new owners, were going to eliminate boxing from the franchise. It didn't make any sense to me because of what boxing had meant to HBO. The preceding chairman, Richard Plepler, was quite open about it and cherished the boxing franchise and understood how distinctive it was at the network and always saw to it that when I came to the Emmys or the Golden Globes party here in Hollywood, I was seated at his table, you know, talking to Tom Hanks or whoever, Julia Roberts, whoever else was there. So I had no inkling that new owners were going to say, bye-bye boxing. And we did that last telecast on December 8, 2018. By that time, I had been told, and we said goodbye that night. And it was deeply heartbreaking for me because I thought, I wonder if I've called my last boxing match. And then enough time went by that I came to the conclusion, yeah, I guess I did call my last boxing match. And that's kind of cool because HBO remains undisturbed. HBO is the prism through which people will look at my boxing career, and that's good. Anything else, I don't know where that would go.
You were almost back a couple of times, though, right? I mean, Triller was around. For
I signed
that
a
event.
contract
You
to
were
work
in
at Triller.
summer
I signed
of-
a contract to work at Triller, and I got a payment.
There you go.
And then I never did a fight. Never once did a fight. Triller worked out perfectly. Thank you very much. But that I can't think of any other moment when I was almost back. There might have been.
Was there any
There've been a
thought-
lot of fits and starts along the way.
Oh, Jake Paul, Mike Tyson. Was there ever any thought to you to doing that? I had heard a little bit of
I had a
that.
discussion about Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, but I knew from the beginning that was not something that I wanted to do. I genuinely like Jake's manager, Sidarian.
Nikisa Badarian, yeah.
Yeah, Nikisa Sidarian. Liked him. Great conversation. Really thoughtful, respectful guy. I respected him. It wasn't the event for me. I do what I think of as ultra legitimate boxing matches, and I'm not a social media person, so I don't even begin to understand the reach and power of what social media are and how they influence people's career. I'm ill-equipped to fully fathom who Ryan Garcia is. I'm ill-equipped to fully fathom who my friend Mario Lopez is, all right? These are people with tens of millions of social media followers. I have 500? How many?
Maybe more than that.
More than that. I'm over 1,000.
There we go.
There you go. So I've got
Few
to
more
start.
after today.
I had
Let's
to begin a social media presence because of the book. So now I'm learning in real time, as we say.
I think that event was a reminder of the power of Mike Tyson. Like, Mike Tyson broke Netflix. Mike Tyson.
Absolutely. No, there's only one Mike Tyson, and he will always be viewed through this fixed prism that sees him as the most reckless and efficient destroyer of all time in the ring. He knows that the reality of it doesn't support that. He knows that he lost on merit to Douglas. Mike is really smart. You know that. He's as intelligent a human being as you can meet. So he sees reality. But his audience does not see reality. And God bless them. As long as they want to make him richer and richer and richer forever, I'm all in. Go Mike.
There's reporting now, and I think it's going to be official soon, that Manny Pacquiao is going to come back, age 46, to fight against Mario Barrios. You called most, if not all, of Manny's most substantive fights over the years. What do you think of that?
Sad. Just sad that he feels any reason or urge whatsoever. However, on the other hand, fighters fight. It's what they do. Hey, Jim Lampley was gone for 6 years. Was it stupid for him to choose to come back and fall a fight? Was it a risk? Was there a possibility that he could embarrass himself and fall on his face? Are there some viewers and listeners out there who think that's exactly what he did? Sure, that's possible. But I was back doing something I love, and I was getting paid for it. So I understand why Manny wants to come back and do something he loves and get paid for it. But it's one thing to talk into a microphone when you've been a few years away and you're a little bit older. It's entirely a different thing to go in and hit and get hit. And he made ungodly, indescribable sums of money. So I wish it were enough. But I'm not surprised that it isn't. You can't be surprised that it isn't. There's nothing in the world. Way back when Ray Leonard was having trouble retiring, and I was friends with Ray, I asked him one time, in the closest, most intimate kind of friendship way, I said, Ray, why is it that you can't give this up? It's one of the greatest quotes I ever heard. He said, Jim, I tried owning restaurants and I tried eating in restaurants. I tried dancing in nightclubs and I tried owning nightclubs. I did every other thing I could do that was supposed to give me that kind of feedback. There is nothing in life that matches the moment of standing up off your stool, sweat glistening on your chest, naked in the eyes of the world except for those trunks and shoes, and stepping forward into the spotlight to face another man. Nothing can match it. I get it. I totally understand that. I understood Ray. I understand Mike. I understood Manny, or I will understand Manny. You know, does it make me happy? It's not really my business. It's their business.
You called what was still the most successful fight in boxing history, which was Mayweather Pacquiao. I've never been a part of a buildup like that, where every mainstream outlet that maybe had abandoned boxing over the years came roaring back. I mean, it was massive. And then the fight happens and we don't get what we hope for. What did you come away from that fight feeling? What did you think of how that whole thing played out?
Well, I want to start this by saying that I like Floyd. And I get along with Floyd. I'm happy for Floyd that he was the first great social media master who demonstrated what the power of social media could be, how an event could be sold on social media, how it didn't matter whether you were approved of or disapproved of, as long as you were being noticed and as long as people cared about you in some way, that you could be alienating on social media and you could still build a following that way. Floyd invented all that. One thing I often say to people is, no Mayweather, no Trump. Trump is a boxing fan. He saw what Floyd did. He realized they don't have to love you. They just have to care about you. And he got that. And mined it to tremendous effect. So for, I don't know, 2-3 years before the fight took place, I'd be walking down a hallway in a hotel in Vegas or standing in an airport or walking down a sidewalk somewhere, and somebody would grab me and say, when am I going to see Mayweather Pacquiao? And every time that happened, I would look at them and say, what is it you expect to see? Okay? Why are you so excited about a fight, which I promise you is not going to yield combat, is not going to yield anything in the way of marketable violence, which is going to be an exhibition of one person's tremendous skill, technique, defensive capability, and is not going to be the can't miss fight that you think it is. And people would give me blank looks. Huh? You know, what are you talking about? I can't wait to see Mayweather Pacquiao. So it happened. And it happened, and I was chosen to call the fight. And I saw exactly the fight that I expected to see. And I knew who would win it from 2 years before, and he won it exactly the way that I thought he would win it. And looking back in my mind, I can't remember whether Pacquiao won a round. If he did, I didn't see it. It just seemed to me like it was the same thing over and over, and Floyd demonstrating that the great defensive counterpuncher with foot skills and speed is never going to have to worry against a full-on, straight-ahead attacker who only knows one way to fight.
So you think it always would have played out that way? Because the what ifs now are what happens.
It would
09,
never,
11.
ever have been any difference. If they were to fight when Floyd is 50 years old, it's still going to be the same thing.
Floyd's in pretty good shape. Maybe they will.
What?
Floyd's in pretty good shape. Maybe they...
There's no question that Floyd is always going to be in shape. Floyd is disciplined. Floyd avoids the bad habits that destroy fighters. He presents the idea of this really active nightlife that implies risk for his conditioning. You know, he's drinking water. Floyd's as smart as anyone I ever knew in boxing, and he proved it by making the most money as a relatively light-hitting featherweight to welterweight counterpuncher. You know, how do you do that? You do it via social media. He was the person who painted the picture to me what social media could do.
And he created maybe a blueprint that we're seeing Canelo follow to a degree, where it's, I'm going to be a businessman first. I'm not going to do anything if I have the power, I'm going to use it effectively.
Who is one of the two people who beat Canelo?
Exactly. Learned.
Canelo's smart. Absolutely, he's smart. He knows this business as well as anybody. So no, it's not surprising that Canelo learned from Floyd and has employed some of that in the retention of his career. Canelo still knows how to make fireworks when he absolutely has to make fireworks. But at the end of the day, he's a counterpuncher. He's a great defender. He has the most solid punch resistance of anybody in the sport. Nobody's ever knocked him off balance. Nobody's ever really knocked him down. There's only one official knockdown in his career, and it was because he bounced off the ropes when Jose Cotto hit him with a hard shot to the chest. And the referee employed a strict interpretation of the rules and said, oh, the ropes held you up, so that's a knockdown. He's never been put on his back by anybody. He rides horseback every morning. His legs are the strongest in the sport. You're not going to beat Canelo until somehow over a long period of time, Canelo beats himself. If he gets tired of all the discipline he has had to employ to make all the money he's made, if he has enough giant ranches in the Yucatan, if he has enough beautiful horses, if he has had enough unforgettable dinners with Mexican billionaires in Mexico City and Vegas, then maybe. But my guess is he will retire without incurring another loss because it's important to him to do that.
Which implies you like him against Bud Crawford.
I do like him against Bud Crawford, but I do think that it's a great fight. Now, I could change my mind when we get closer. Bud Crawford, to me, is a latter-day Sugar Ray Robinson. He has the multiple skills of Sugar Ray Robinson. He can defend or attack. He has a deep inner mean streak that he can employ at any moment in a fight to get what he wants. Before the fight against, help me out here,
Madrimov was his last fight. Spence?
Spence.
Yes.
Before the fight against Errol Spence, there were quite a lot of people in the sport, in boxing media, who were saying, I like Spence to win the fight. I was one of those people who said, no way. Errol Spence doesn't have the depth and the intellectual understanding of prize fighting to beat Terence Crawford, who is the great professional of his era, along with Canelo Alvarez. That's why that's such a great fight. They are the two living, practicing ultra professionals in the sport. They know it inside out. And one way or another, it's going to be a spectacular intellectual matchup of two great ring strategists. Can't wait to see it.
Neither can I. September is going to be quite the event. Jim, always great to catch up with you. Thank you for coming here in studio. The book is It Happened, A Uniquely Lucky Life in Sports Television. You can buy it now and everywhere. I should add, though, as we sit here on the set of Mannix and Mora, that I don't see a Sergio chapter in here.
Yeah, that's really too bad.
Did I miss it?
There should have been a chapter
page?
about Sergio. If I had told a story about Sergio, it probably would have been the one that I shared with you earlier.
Okay.
And you said to me, that's Sergio.
That's Sergio, who to this day will remember the Shane Mosley fight.
And will remember what I said about the Shane Mosley.
He does remember.
That's one of the things that you're absolutely going to incur that if you call boxing matches, that sooner or later,
of course,
some fighter is going to come up to you and try to make you feel really uncomfortable about what you said. And Sergio did make me feel uncomfortable for, 15 or 20 seconds until he decided, all right, I've done enough of this.
You could call, you obviously know this, but you can, and I'm learning this, is that you can say 99 great things about a fighter, but if you say one negative, that's the only thing they
That's the one he's going to remember.
That's the one they will ruminate on and
absolutely
define
no
you
question.
as.
Yeah.
Jim, great to see you and hope to catch up again
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much.